Across the shorelines and coastal waters of the Southern Hemisphere, some of the most beloved and popularised animals in the world can be found, gathered in colossal, noisy colonies. These flightless birds are almost comical in the way they walk, slide and hop across rocky beaches, frozen wastes and sand dunes, made even more so by the tuxedo-like feather patterns across their bodies. We're talking, of course, about the penguins. Today, penguins exist in a multitude of forms, from the tiny little blue penguin to the much larger emperor penguin. Clumsy on land, they really come into their own when they hit the waves, as they dart after fish and away from predators. The natural history of these charismatic seabirds goes much deeper than this, though. Penguins lead complex social lives in some of the harshest environments in the world. They struggle against battering icy winds, climate change, and some of the most well-adapted carnivores in the world every day. Today, then, we will be travelling across the Southern Hemisphere to meet the penguins, taking a look at them both as individual species and as a whole family. How do these creatures survive when the whole world seems to be tilting out of their favour? What is it like to be a penguin out on the harsh Antarctic ice sheets? And how did they evolve to look unlike any other bird alive today? Join us as we answer all of these questions and more as we dive into the fascinating life of the penguins. The 18 species of penguin alive today are members of the family Sphenicidae, which in turn sits within the order Spheniciformes. The first thing you'll notice about any of these species is that they are quite unlike any other living bird known to science today. First of all, each of these species are entirely flightless. They are too heavy to fly, and moreover, they don't need to. Penguins exchange the ability to fly through the air for the ability to fly underwater, and their short yet broad wings have adapted into powerful flippers. Penguin wings have the same basic bone structure as those seen in flying birds, but the individual bones are shorter and stouter in penguins. On land, these birds are ungainly, as they hop and waddle their way through the coastlines they call home. In the water, though, it's a different story. A penguin's waterproof feathers and streamlined forms allow them to dart through the waves like miniature torpedoes. They spend, on average, about half of their entire lives in the water and are more at home within it than any other group of birds. A penguin's feathers aren't just for waterproofing their bodies, however. They serve to insulate the birds in the harsh, often freezing environments in which certain species live. Between their feathers, penguins trap layers of air, which helps them to stay buoyant in the water, contributing to their unmatched agility while swimming. The colour of the feathers, almost always black on the back and white on the belly, helps penguins to camouflage themselves from predators by a method known as counter-shading. A penguin's light belly can help it to blend in with the sunlight trickling down from the surface above, so any hungry orcas, sharks or leopard seals waiting below will find it harder to detect them. Moreover, a penguin's black back helps it blend in with the murkier waters below, meaning that they are also concealed from any predators swimming above them in the water column. When on land, a penguin will use its tail and wings to balance itself in an upright position. Those that live in colder regions blanketed in layers of ice can adopt a flat stance, sliding on their bellies across the frigid wastes in what is known as tobogganing. This can help the penguins get from A to B quicker while conserving energy. They can be vulnerable to predation on land, however, especially if they find themselves far from the water's edge in the presence of a terrestrial hunter such as a fox. As such, penguins rely on being able to retreat to the safety of the water, or vice versa, depending on the type of predator that is hunting them. Very few other bird species have adapted to aquatic lifestyles in the same way penguins have. They are the true acrobats of the underwater world. The Gentoo penguin, for example, is the fastest swimming bird on the planet, reaching speeds of 36 kilometers, or 22 miles per hour. Emperor penguins, on the other hand, are not only the largest penguin species, but the deepest diving bird species ever recorded. While hunting, they can reach depths of over 550 meters, or 1,800 feet. At this depth, most of the sun's rays are greatly diminished and vision is highly obscured. The deepest free dive in a human was achieved by Herbert Nitsch in 2012, who managed to make it just over 250 meters, or 830 feet deep. That's a phenomenal feat for a human, but perhaps not for an emperor penguin. Penguins can be found all across the Southern Hemisphere, ranging as far south as Antarctica and as far north as the Galapagos Islands. They are absent from the Arctic entirely, and so, while the idea of polar bears and penguins living side by side might be ingrained in our minds as a result of pop culture depictions, this encounter would never naturally happen in the wild. Additionally, they do not live solely in cold regions, and some species thrive on the warm coasts of Angola, Namibia, South Africa, and Australia. Typically, the bigger the penguin, the colder the environment they can be found in, but there are some exceptions. The Antarctic is home to a few smaller species, each with their own sets of adaptations for braving the cold. Penguin habitats all center around coastal regions where rich waters, full of fish, can be found. On land, they can be found across rocky and sandy shores, as well as ice floes and tiny islands where terrestrial predators are absent or rare. There are 18 species of penguin in the world today, which are organized into 6 genera. Closely related species can look extremely similar and can sometimes be hard to identify, whereas between genera, the differences are often much more obvious. The known species of penguin on planet Earth today are the macaroni penguin, or Eudyptes chrysolophus. This is the first of the crested penguins, identified by the thick strip of bright yellow feathers running just above each eye. Specifically, this species is named for its crest's likeness to the hairstyles sported by men in the macaroni subculture of 18th century Britain. In the macaroni penguin, the crest is very pronounced, and like most of its relatives, it has a bright red beak. Standing at 70 centimeters or 28 inches tall, this species can be found across many of the subantarctic islands and on the Antarctic Peninsula itself. The IUCN lists the macaroni penguin as vulnerable. The royal penguin, or Eudyptes schlegeli. Despite being found only on the sub-Antarctic Macquarie Island south of New Zealand, this crested penguin is listed as least concern by the IUCN. Some believe the royal penguin to be a subspecies of macaroni penguin, but can be identified by their bright white faces and chins. They can reach up to 76 centimeters or 30 inches tall and spend much of their time out in the open ocean or pelagic zone. The northern rockhopper penguin, or Eudyptes moselei, widespread across the islands of the southern Indian and Atlantic Oceans, this species has sadly declined by 90% since the 1950s and is now considered to be endangered by the IUCN. Identified by their broad red bills, striking crimson eyes, and long trailing crest feathers, these birds can reach up to 50 centimeters or 20 inches in height. The southern rockhopper penguin, or Eudyptes chrysocome, distinguishable from its northern cousin only by its thinner yellow crest, it is roughly the same size and inhabits the same range. It is, however, slightly less endangered. It is classified as vulnerable by the IUCN. It can often be seen in huge colonies, scrambling and leaping from rock to rock on jagged coastal outcrops. The Fiordland penguin, or Eudyptes pachyrhynchus. Endemic to New Zealand's South Island, this species is classed as near threatened and can be found exclusively on the coastlines to the southwest. It can reach 55 centimeters or 22 inches in height and can be identified by its lack of bare skin around the base of its thick red bill. The Snares penguin, or Eudyptes robustus. Very similar to the Fiordland penguin in appearance, the Snares penguin can be found exclusively on the Snares Islands to the north of New Zealand, where it is classed as vulnerable. It can reach up to 70 centimeters, or 27.5 inches in height. The Maori first encountered this bird, who called it the pokotiwa. It can be identified by the strip of bright yellow skin running along the base of its beak. The erect-crested penguin, or Eudiptes scliteri. This species' yellow crest shoots directly upward, hence the name. Endemic to the Bounty and Antipodes Islands off the south coast of New Zealand, and occasionally the mainland itself, this bird is classified as endangered. Adults can measure up to 70 centimeters or 28 inches tall, and sometimes has flecks of blue running through its otherwise jet black back feathers. The Galapagos penguin, or Spheniscus mendiculus. Endemic to the Galapagos Islands of Ecuador, this bird is classified as endangered. It is the first of the banded penguins, whose plumage is characterized by a thick black band across their neck and chest. Adults can reach 50 centimeters or 20 inches in height and can be identified by their entirely black heads and wings. The Humboldt penguin, or Spheniscus humboldti. This bird can be found along the Pacific coastlines of South America, mainly Peru and Chile, and is one of the species most commonly exhibited in zoos. Named after the explorer Alexander von Humboldt, this species can be identified by the strip of pink skin lining the base of its beak. It can reach 70 centimeters or 28 inches in height, and is classified as vulnerable by the IUCN. The Magellanic penguin, or Spheniscus magellanicus. Classified as least concern, this species can be found across much of the southern coastlines of South America, from Brazil through to Argentina, right round to the central point of Chile. It can reach 76 centimeters, or 30 inches in height, and can be identified by the pink patch of skin between its beak and eye. The species is named for Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, who first noted the bird scientifically on his expeditions to the southernmost points of South America. The African penguin, or Spheniscus demersus. This species can be found across the coastlines of Southwest Africa, with resident populations established in Namibia and South Africa. Also known as the jackass penguin, on account of its donkey-like braying call, the African penguin can be identified by its particularly distinct pink eye patches and black facial markings. Adults can reach 70 centimeters or 28 inches tall, and the species is sadly classified as critically endangered by the IUCN. The Adelie penguin, or Pygocelis adelii. This penguin is classified as least concern and can be found all across the coast of Antarctica. The first of the brush-tailed penguins, it is the most widespread and populous penguin species in the world and can be identified by its jet black head and thin blue eye patch. It is named after Adelie Land, a French colony within Antarctica, where these birds are particularly common. Adults can reach up to 73 centimeters or 29 inches tall. The chinstrap penguin, or Pygocelis antarcticus. This species is found across the islands and coastlines of the Southern Ocean and is classified as least concern. Easily identified by the thin black strip of feathers running under its chin, they can reach 76 centimeters or 30 inches in height when fully grown. The gentoo penguin, or Pygocelis papua. This bird can be identified by the white patch of feathers running above its eye and is another popular zoo species. They can be found across the western reaches of the Southern Ocean, breeding on the Antarctic Peninsula and the southern coastlines of South America. Large gentoo penguins can reach 90 centimeters or 35 inches in height, and the species is classified as least concern. The king penguin, or Aptenodytes patagonicus. The first of the two great penguins, the king penguin can be identified by its jet black head, grey back, and the bright orange blotch behind its eye. Found in scattered island chains across the Southern Ocean, the king penguin is classified as least concern by the IUCN and is fully protected by conservation law. They can reach up to 1 meter or 39 inches in height. The emperor penguin, or Aptenodytes forsteri. The largest and deepest diving penguin species, emperors, live across the coastlines of Antarctica. and can reach up to 1.2 meters or 47 inches in height. As chicks, they are fluffy and grey, but the adults develop spectacular orange and yellow neck patches that blend in seamlessly with the white of their bellies. They are classed as near threatened by the IUCN. The little penguin, or Eudiptula minor. This is the smallest species of penguin worldwide, reaching only 33 centimeters or 13 inches in height. Also known as the blue or fairy penguin, this species can be found on the sandy beaches of New Zealand and Australia, and is classified as least concern. Unlike other species, the little penguin is mainly blue across its back, with pale pink feet and a white belly. Finally, we have the yellow-eyed penguin, or Megadipts antipodes. An endangered species, this penguin can be found only on New Zealand's South Island and the small island chains further to the south. Often a murky brown colour across the back and head, this penguin can be identified by its pale yellow crest and, as you might have guessed, its yellow eyes. Penguins are social birds and can often be found in huge groups known as colonies, which can exceed hundreds of thousands of individual birds in certain species. King and chinstrap penguins tend to live in enormous colonies like these, whereas smaller species, such as gentoo penguins, may live in colonies of just a few hundred birds. Some species, including the Fiordland penguin, may not live in colonies at all, but small groups. Colonies can be incredibly noisy, and as such, penguins have developed a wide range of vocalizations to communicate with members of their species. While some species make simple, chirping noises, others can make deep trumpeting or braying sounds that may not even sound like those of a bird at all. Penguins will make short, sharp honking noises to grab the attention of another, while display calls may be much longer and drawn out. Many species will engage in spectacular communicative displays, where they slowly raise their heads to the point where they are looking directly upwards. Then, they usually flap their wings and make elongated braying noises. Living in colonies makes it easier for penguins to evade the capture of predators. In huge numbers, animals that prey on penguins, such as killer whales, sharks, foxes, skuas, petrels, and certain species of seal, will find it harder to target a single individual. There is also less chance that you, as an individual penguin, will be killed if you're living in a colony made up of hundreds of thousands of neighbours. Colony life also makes it much easier to find a mate, and the bigger the colony, the more diverse the gene pool. During breeding time, most penguins will find one mate, sticking together with them throughout the course of the season, if not for life. Clutches will usually contain 2 eggs, but the larger species, such as emperor penguins, will only lay 1. Unusually, the little penguin can give birth to multiple clutches in the space of 1 season, while most penguins typically rear 1 or 2 chicks per year. Comparative to their size, penguin eggs are the smallest among birds. The reason for this is to minimize the risk of dehydration for the embryo inside. Also, their eggshells are very thick, likely to minimize the risk of an egg breaking prematurely if the parents can only rear 1 clutch per year. Interestingly, emperor penguin mothers may kidnap a neighboring chick if they lose their own. It doesn't usually work, as other females will help to defend the targeted baby. Usually, parents are very civil with the chicks of other individuals and can form large nursery groups known as creches. Occasionally, due to the size of some penguin colonies, chicks can become lost amidst the chaos and the crowds. As such, a mother is able to identify her chick via a unique call. One of the most iconic sights in nature is the struggle of emperor penguin youngsters to survive out on the howling Antarctic wastes during the cold winter months. Usually, both penguin parents will take care of a newly laid egg, but with emperors, the male will do all of the work. Once laid, the egg will be passed from the female to the male, as they precariously try and stop it from coming into prolonged contact with the freezing ice below. The male will balance the egg on the top of his feet, sheltering it with the warm down of his belly feathers. Then, The females will take off to sea, sometimes for weeks at a time, to search for food that will help give the chick the best start in life when it hatches. Hungry, freezing, and with the responsibility of a new life on his shoulders, the male will proceed to huddle amidst other fathers to bear the brunt of the Antarctic blizzards. Penguins will take turns to stand in the middle of the huddle, where it is the warmest, with those on the outside taking the heavy blasts of snow and wind. The chicks will soon hatch, and the mothers will return with crops full of food. The hungry baby then proceeds to swallow a nutritious, regurgitated mix of fish and squid from their mother's gullet, which may sound disgusting to us, but it's everything this little chick has been waiting for. Despite the great degree of insulation afforded to Antarctic penguins by their feathers, they need to maintain their coats. Feathers are often battered by wind, water, predators, and other penguins, and can be worn down over time. To combat this, penguins will frequently molt their feathers, so new, healthier ones can take their place. Penguins will molt their feathers over the course of a few weeks, which can make them look rather unkempt as they wait for their new coats to emerge. Before they molt, a penguin will eat far more than its usual share, as it will be unable to enter the water once it starts to lose patches of feathers. Doing so could lead to hypothermia, an extremely dangerous threat when you live in sub-zero temperatures. Once the new feathers come through, the struggle against the elements isn't over. A penguin will need to routinely preen themselves, and can often be seen doing so as they stand on the shoreline, seemingly pecking at their backs and wings. In fact, penguins have evolved an oil gland at the base of their tail, which they will occasionally peck at first, before transferring that oil to their feathers. This helps keep the bird waterproof and insulated, and penguins that preen often will maintain their streamlined, glossy appearances. Penguins are carnivores, speeding through the water after shoals of fish and squid, which they proceed to catch in their broad, powerful beaks. Every aspect of a penguin's beak is designed to pluck and hold slippery prey. A 2024 study showed that their beaks are covered in nerve endings, which help them calculate exactly where they need to bite and focus their pressure to snap at, manipulate, and hold their food. Moreover, the tongue of a penguin is covered in sharp, fleshy spines, which snag soft-bodied prey items such as cephalopods, preventing them from escaping once they are firmly secured in the beak. Penguins hunt by sight, using the same keen vision that helps them in turn stay out of the jaws of killer whales and sharks. They can even drink seawater, thanks to a gland located just above the eyes, which filters out the salt before it enters their bloodstream. They can then effectively sneeze away the salt they cannot process elsewhere. This allows them to thrive not only far away from fresh water, but also on tiny, isolated islands where rivers and streams are entirely absent. Penguins are an ancient group of birds who can trace their origins back to around 62 million years ago, not long after the non-avian dinosaurs became extinct. The first penguins lived in the seas between New Zealand and Antarctica. At that time, these two land masses were much closer together than they are now, and the world was much warmer. Subtropical oceans filled with prehistoric fishes kept many species of primitive penguin alive, and some of them grew gigantic. Anthropornis, a genus that lived between 43 and 33 million years ago, could reach 1.8 meters, or just under 6 feet tall, making it tall enough to look the average human man in the eye. Not only were these early penguins large, but they were also efficient hunters, darting through the waves with long, spear-shaped bills, hunting fish and squid in the surf. These birds did not need to fly. There were very few terrestrial predators on their island homes for them to escape, and all the food they needed could be found within the waves. Throughout the millennia that followed, the penguins we know and love today began to appear. The earliest, or most basal, were the great penguins, the king and emperor varieties. Then came the much smaller brush-tailed penguins, such as the Adelie and chinstrap, followed by the banded and crested penguins. The little and yellow-eyed penguins diverged last in terms of modern genera, roughly between 15 and 14 million years ago. The species that exist today are the last surviving remnants of those genera. Many penguin species outside of Africa were first encountered by the Maori people as they traversed the islands of the South Pacific, spreading their culture and encountering a multitude of new animal species. The Fiordland penguin, known to the Maoris as the Tawaki, commonly appeared in their mythology. Legends tell of the Tawaki once walking among humankind before it grew its bright yellow crest, a divine gift of lightning from the gods. The first penguins to encounter humans did not fear them. In many regions, penguins have no natural terrestrial predators and only feared threats from the waves and sky. As such, peoples throughout history have hunted penguins for their meat, but most species are not particularly favored for it. Dogs proved to be a real threat to penguins when human settlers arrived in their environments. This was a particular issue with sled dogs in Antarctica, who killed penguins in droves. Dogs have since been banned from the continent, and many Antarctic penguin species are protected by law. Today, several penguin species are threatened with extinction. The most endangered penguins are the African, Galapagos, erect-crested, yellow-eyed, and northern rockhopper species. African penguins in particular have plummeted in number following the industrialization and colonization of southern Africa, and their breeding is now restricted to just 24 islands along the coastlines of Namibia and South Africa. As of 2023, just 10,000 breeding pairs were left in these regions, and it was projected that the species would become extinct by the mid-2030s if action was not taken. Threats to the species have come in the form of overfishing, which diminishes food stocks for the birds, as well as pollution and habitat loss. To help prevent the destruction of the species, the South African government have introduced no fishing zones around 6 of the penguins' most important breeding regions. Hopefully, we can start to see an increase in numbers for these birds soon. The Galapagos penguin, on the other hand, is particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Specifically, the El Niño climate events ravage their populations, where changes in winds and surface water temperatures across the tropics affect the availability of food in the penguins' already small home range. 2 El Niño events in 1982 to 1983 and then again in 1997 to 1998 were responsible for the loss of 77 and 65% of Galapagos penguins respectively, and further events impeded the species' recovery rate throughout the 2000s. If the pattern of El Niño events experienced from 1965 to 2004 is mirrored going forward, the Galapagos penguin has a 30% chance of becoming extinct entirely. Alternatively, if the El Niño effects worsen to match the increasing threat of climate change in modern times, the penguin has an 80% chance of becoming extinct. Some species, the Galapagos penguin included, are also at risk from the spread of disease throughout their environments. Mosquitoes that carry avian malaria can have significant effects on penguin populations, while Marek's disease, a pathogen that spreads amongst bird species from domestic chickens, continues to spread across populations in the Galapagos. Naturally occurring diseases may also be spread to the penguins of the Galapagos Islands from migratory birds such as the bobolink, a small species of New World blackbird that travels from North to South America, passing through the Galapagos after breeding. Northern rockhopper penguins face different threats altogether. While climate change, hunting, and overfishing has ravaged the population to a massive 90% decline, the birds are also at risk from a series of animal threats. Subantarctic fur seals hunt northern rockhoppers in huge numbers, while goose barnacles may attach themselves to penguins, making it harder for them to hunt and generally contributing to malnutrition, dehydration, and ill health. Moreover, northern rockhoppers are at risk from the introduction of the invasive house mouse to their island environments, which find their way onto human ships. The mice make their way onto the islands in which the penguins live when the ships dock, and breed prolifically. Moreover, these mice are adaptable and hard to eradicate, feeding on the eggs of penguins and even the young of the birds themselves. Even worse is the constant threat of pollution and oil spills, such as the one that took place in March 2011 when the MS Olivia ran aground on Nightingale Island, a key northern rockhopper stronghold. The wreck caused tons of crude oil to filter into the ocean, leaving a slick that encapsulated the entire island. Thousands of penguins came into contact with the oil, and considering that Nightingale Island has no fresh water at all, the affected birds had to be moved to the volcanic islands of Tristan da Cunha for cleaning. Penguins are supremely adapted to the oceanic lifestyles they live. No other living bird even comes close to being able to spend their whole lives in and around the sea. This specialization, however, may be their Achilles heel. Some species are struggling to cope with the advancement of humankind in their environments and the impact we have on the climate. As fish stocks dwindle, penguins are backed into tiny corners of their former ranges, and some are seriously struggling. There is hope, however. Emperor penguins were formerly targeted for their meat in large numbers across Antarctica and are now protected by international law, securing their future as a least concerned species. If humans have saved one species of penguin, we can do it again. To help secure a future for these amazing birds, there are a few things you can do from home. Be mindful about your impact on the environment where you can. Think about limiting your consumption of seafood, and consider supporting charities such as the Global Penguin Society, World Wildlife Fund, and Zoological Society of London, whose work has helped conserve threatened species of penguin far and wide across the Southern Hemisphere.